Hey guys! So, today you and I are going to talk about isolation, or more specifically, isolated developers and the dangers that come with that. Now, you may not think this, and for those of you who maybe are a little bit on the conservative side, and even business owners out there who are, maybe you haven't been running your company for that long and you haven't really considered these types of things. Because the thing is that at the early stages of a company, it's very important that you go for speed in order to deliver value so that you can stabilize your revenue streams. That is very important. But as you go along, as the company matures, your company stabilizes. And it becomes more and more important for you to stabilize rather than deliver as quickly as possible. Speed is always going to be a factor, but you don't have to move as fast and cut as many corners when you get to a certain level. The really, really big companies, they are actually very slow because the product is so massive that they kind of don't have to move as quickly. It's more important to be consistent, careful maneuvering in the marketplace and all that stuff. So if we accept this idea that stability becomes a very critical issue, we reach basically the topic of discussion: isolation. Now, I'll tell you a story from work, of course, because hey, ain't no better way to share ideas and thoughts than with a story from your own life, right? Or rather, I hope that's the case, because otherwise this entire channel of mine is going to be really dull for everybody. Anywho, so basically at work right now, we are working on a feature that is going to, we're attempting to solve the most tricky problem I have ever had to work with. And in a few of my other videos, I've talked about what that problem is. And to summarize very quickly, it's basically interval detection on payment transactions to figure out if something is a subscription or not. A payment, like basically a bunch of records of different payments, and we figure out if it's a subscription or if it's a one-time type of deal, like if you just bought something in a store. That's the problem. Now, you may not think that, but without going into too much detail, that is really, really tricky. Anywho, so for the past, past month or so, 6 weeks maybe, we've had this, one of my colleagues who was unfortunate enough to, I think he kind of likes it. He looks like the sort of guy who likes pain and frustration. So I think he's kind of into it. And after meeting his girlfriend, I'm more convinced that that is the case as well. Well, I don't know what's going on there, but hey. Anywho, this guy is absolutely lovely in every way, and I'm just joking, obviously. And he's been working on this problem. And just the other day, we were talking about, he actually raised this question. I haven't said anything because I don't want to be the guy who says that, hey, the way that I think and the way I want to do things, that's the right way to do it. There's no other way to do it, yada, yada, yada. But he raised the question, is it right for me to be the only guy working on this? And that's exactly what I wanted him to question. Because as things are today, we have, there's been one more guy semi-involved in the development of this algorithm. And this is a very, very, very complicated problem. It's a very complicated algorithm. And basically, we're in the situation where only this guy, only my colleague, although he's dedicated to the project and he's, really, really good at what he does, he's the only person who has an intimate understanding of how the algorithm works. Nobody else does. And when something is this complicated, it becomes very tricky for anyone to understand what's going on unless they're really invested into the problem. Now, you can argue that this is the way to go, because if it becomes very difficult for many people to contribute to a single algorithm. However, because we're not sharing that knowledge, we're now in a position right now, and I have a few suggestions how to fix this, but Right now, he's the only person who can work and maintain in an effective manner that with that algorithm, basically. That is a big liability to the company. Because imagine if this algorithm becomes a massive success and we keep it around, and basically we start founding a lot of stuff, or like basing a lot of our new features on this algorithm. And because we're not touching it anymore, and because he's the guy, because he now is perceived to own it. I've talked about that in the past. If you break it, you own it. It's just the way it works in IT. If you deliver a really big feature, and people in the company perceive you as being the person who delivered this feature, you own it for the rest of your time in that company. Anytime anybody has a problem with it, they're going to come to you because you know the most. So it very naturally becomes your thing, and this is his thing. The problem, as I said, is that this is a very complicated algorithm. It is business critical to the point where the entire success of the company is very tightly coupled to the effectiveness of this feature. So what happens if he leaves the company? What happens if he gets sick and we have an issue that we need to fix quickly? Well, as you can imagine, that's a bit of a problem. We don't have anybody else who can really, like in a short amount of time, start fixing things. And this is a stability issue, which is, I think that there's two factors that you need to consider in here. The perspective from the business and the perspective of the developer. Now, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a regular human who likes to feel special like anybody else, and I think that he enjoys, doing this. The issue, which I think is, actually I was very impressed that he was mature enough to start thinking about these things, because he's a little bit younger. And the thing is that when he says that it's, he doesn't feel comfortable with him being the only person working on this, it shows that he realizes that although it feels nice to be special, to be that guy who delivered this awesome feature, you're putting the company in a risky position. I've worked at other companies where some person in isolation created a very complicated thing and they got a lot of praise for it, but the company has suffered, and it has cost the company hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in revenue loss, because they can't simply maintain the project when that person leaves. So knowledge sharing between colleagues and making sure that that your developers are collaborating, especially if it's a complicated feature, is paramount. And this is for the business people out there. If you think that it's a waste of time, you are sorely mistaken. Trust me, watch this video when you come back, when a few years down the road, when your company has matured, and your developers come up to you and say, hey, we have to rewrite this entire thing because nobody knows how it works. Then you can come and watch my video again, and then I'll stand here and say, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. Because that's what happens. As something develops and becomes more and more complicated, it becomes even more critical that more people know how it works. And although that doesn't feel nice at the time, because it costs more to have more people involved. I mean, if two people are working on the same thing, in theory, you're losing half your development speed. But it is so important, at least for the things that are really critical. So if you want to have a nice middle ground, here's my tip to you. There is a concept called the mob programming. Basically, all your developers sit with a single code base and just go through the code together. If you have something that is business critical, you as the company, or the CTO, whoever you are, you need to acknowledge and be very serious about making sure that everybody in the development team, and ideally as many people as possible, know how this works. It's very important, because if you lose anybody, you don't want to have that single person be the only person, that knows how it works. So share that knowledge. Use mob coding to share knowledge on critical features or critical functionality that is going to be important for the rest, for the entire company, or rather for as many people as possible to know about. You don't have to do this for every single feature, but for the critical stuff, you absolutely must do it.